The airport was busy that morning, full of travelers rushing to catch flights. Parents holding their children's hands tightly, business people carrying briefcases, and families carrying luggage and excitement. Among them was a woman who stood out, though not just because of her presence. She walked with confidence, each step calm but purposeful. She was a CEO of a large company, someone who had built her empire through determination, long hours, and smart decisions. Her life was one of achievements that many could only dream of. But today she was not thinking about deals or meetings. She was thinking about a long-awaited trip that would take her to an important conference, where she had been invited as a keynote speaker. As she approached the VIP lounge, she noticed the usual quiet hum of polite conversation and soft footsteps on the carpet. People here moved differently, with a relaxed ease that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the main terminal. She had been here many times before. Staff greeted her with smiles and professional nods, accustomed to her presence and her reputation. Today she felt a sense of relief to finally sit down and take a short break before the boarding process began. She had chosen a seat near the large window, which offered a panoramic view of the planes on the tarmac. It was a spot she loved, where she could watch the world move while feeling detached from its constant rush. Just as she settled into her seat, a young staff member approached. He had a polite smile, but there was something hesitant in his eyes. She noticed it immediately. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice careful. "There's a request for this seat. It seems a passenger prefers this spot." She raised her eyebrows in mild surprise. "Who is the passenger?" she asked. The staff member hesitated and then said, He is a first-class guest. He prefers this seat." She looked around, realizing that someone had indeed just entered the lounge. A man, white, impeccably dressed, was making his way through the space. She could tell he was someone accustomed to attention, moving with that air of entitlement that some people naturally carried. For a moment, she felt a rush of disbelief. She had spent years breaking barriers, climbing ladders in industries where people often doubted her abilities. She had faced challenges that would have discouraged others, and yet here she was asked to leave her seat in a VIP lounge for someone who, on paper, was no more important than she was. The injustice stung, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had learned long ago that patience and composure often carried more power than anger. The staff member gently repeated his request. "Please, ma'am, could you move to another seat?" Her mind raced. She looked at the other seats available, all occupied or far less comfortable, and she thought about the message it sent. She had been here many times, had paid for her membership, and had earned her right to enjoy the facilities without interruption. The idea of being treated as less, simply because of the color of her skin, ignited a quiet anger within her. But she did not show it. She simply nodded politely and stood up, moving toward a less prominent seat near the far corner. As she walked past the man who had been given her spot, she could feel the weight of his gaze. It was not hostile, not directly, but there was a sense of entitlement, the kind that assumed the world belonged to him by default. She sat down, straightening her back, holding herself with dignity. Around her, the lounge continued its usual rhythm, but she noticed small things she hadn't before. The subtle glances of other travelers, some sympathetic, some curious, and some indifferent. It was as if the room was collectively watching a silent drama unfold, though few spoke. Her phone vibrated with messages. One was from a colleague who had heard about her early arrival and was reminding her about the schedule. She typed a quick reply, but her mind wandered back to the seat she had just vacated. It was more than a chair. It was a symbol, a small yet powerful reminder that even in spaces where success should protect you, bias could still find a way to assert itself. She thought about the countless women and people of color who had been taught to comply, to smile, to accept what they were given without protest. She had spent her life challenging those lessons, but in that moment, the memory of every small injustice she had faced returned vividly. Yet, she chose not to dwell. She took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was there. The conference awaited. Her speech had the potential to inspire thousands. Her company's reputation depended on her focus and composure. She could not let this small, albeit hurtful incident shake her confidence or dictate her mood. She watched the planes outside, letting her mind clear and focusing on the horizon. Minutes later, the man who had taken her seat leaned back, looking comfortable and satisfied. Staff hovered nearby, offering drinks and assistance as if nothing had happened. She observed them quietly, noting their smiles, their tone, their body language. Some were genuinely polite, others seemed nervous. She realized that in their attempt to serve the preferred guest, they had compromised their professionalism and their awareness. They had allowed bias to dictate their actions rather than fairness or respect for all guests. She decided she would not let this slide silently. Not here, not ever. But she also understood the importance of timing and approach. Public confrontation could escalate unnecessarily. Instead, she chose to act with strategy, patience, and subtle power. She made a mental note to address the issue calmly but firmly, ensuring that those responsible would understand the impact of their behavior. She knew that in moments like these, clarity and composure mattered more than immediate reaction. As she waited for the boarding announcement, she reflected on the broader picture. This incident was not just about a seat in a lounge. It was a reminder that prejudice could surface in the most unexpected places, even where people assumed professionalism would override personal bias. It was a test, one she intended to navigate with integrity and resolve. She reminded herself that her success had always been built not just on ambition, but on resilience, the ability to turn setbacks into lessons, to transform unfairness into motivation. Around her, life went on. Travelers chatted, checked their phones, sipped coffee, and occasionally glanced at the runway. The hum of activity was constant, but for her, the air felt charged with anticipation. Something significant was about to unfold, though she did not yet know how. The moment she had been forced to move from her seat had planted a seed of determination. She would not allow this incident to be forgotten. She would turn it into an opportunity, not only to correct the immediate wrong, but to challenge the assumptions and behaviors that had made it possible. Finally, the boarding announcement came. The lounge staff began preparing for the next phase of service, subtly shifting their focus. She stood up, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the gate, moving with the same confidence and grace that had carried her through countless boardrooms and negotiations. She knew that the real challenge had just begun, and she was ready. What had started as a moment of quiet humiliation would soon become a story of accountability, resilience, and the power of standing firm in one's dignity. As she approached the gate, she noticed other passengers watching her, sensing the tension that had occurred moments ago. Some were curious, some indifferent. But the presence of witnesses reminded her that actions, even small ones, had consequences. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to center her thoughts. Her focus was clear: address the situation, maintain her composure, and ensure that fairness prevailed. She knew the coming minutes would be crucial, and she was prepared to turn an uncomfortable encounter into a defining moment. With calm determination, she walked forward, ready to confront the situation head-on, not with anger, but with authority. Every step she took was a reminder of her journey, the obstacles she had overcome, and the dignity she carried. Today was not just about a seat in the lounge. It was about sending a clear message that respect and professionalism could not be compromised by bias. And in that quiet moment, amidst the bustling airport and the indifferent crowd, she felt a sense of control and purpose. The world had tried to sideline her, to make her feel less than she was. But she would not allow that. Not today, not ever. As she moved toward the boarding gate, the woman could feel the lingering tension from the lounge incident. Every step she took was measured, calm, but inside a storm of emotions was quietly building. She thought about how strange it was that even in spaces designed for comfort and professionalism, bias could seep in so easily. She had expected a smooth experience, a moment of peace before a demanding day, and instead, she had been reminded once again that respect was never guaranteed. She glanced around the boarding area, observing people in their own little worlds, some chatting loudly on the phone, others scrolling through their devices, and some just staring out at the planes as if lost in thought. She noticed the staff at the counter, the same ones who had asked her to leave her seat. Their faces were polite, professional on the surface, but there was a certain stiffness in their posture. They seemed aware of her presence, perhaps realizing that the way they had treated her was now under silent judgment. She walked past them with her head held high, making sure that her dignity was evident in every movement. As she approached the gate, she noticed a few passengers glancing her way. Some were curious, probably wondering about the subtle tension in the air. Others seemed indifferent, lost in their own travel worries. A young man sitting nearby was whispering to a companion, pointing discreetly in her direction. She caught snippets of his words, something about a VIP being treated unfairly. She didn't react outwardly, but a quiet sense of satisfaction passed through her. Even if only a few people noticed, the truth had a way of traveling, especially when it was witnessed with integrity. The boarding process began, and she presented her ticket with a calm, steady hand. The attendant scanned it, looked at her for a moment, and handed it back with a polite nod. Nothing had changed on the surface, but she knew the dynamic had shifted. The earlier incident had not gone unnoticed, and now she felt the weight of quiet attention from those around her. This was her moment to control the narrative, not through confrontation but through presence and poise. As she stepped onto the plane, she noticed the same passenger who had taken her seat in the lounge. He was seated comfortably, reclining slightly, clearly satisfied with the small victory he had claimed. She didn't let it bother her outwardly, though her mind catalogued every detail. The flight attendants greeted her warmly, though she could see the flicker of unease in their eyes. They had followed instructions, but their hesitation suggested that they were aware of a larger issue, even if they couldn't fully articulate it. She found her own seat a few rows away, placing her bag in the overhead compartment and settling in. She looked around the cabin quietly, noticing the subtle reactions of other passengers. Some were watching her with curiosity, some with admiration, and some seemed unaware of the tension entirely. She focused on taking a few deep breaths, centering herself. She had learned over the years that moments of injustice were best handled with clarity and calm, rather than impulsive emotion. Once the plane took off and reached cruising altitude, she allowed herself a moment to think. She considered her next steps carefully. Public exposure could be a powerful tool, especially in a world where social media amplified even small incidents quickly. But she also knew the importance of measured action. Reacting hastily could lead to misunderstandings, while waiting for the right opportunity could turn the incident into a lesson for everyone involved. She decided to document everything discreetly: notes on what had happened, the responses of staff, the behavior of the other passenger. These details might seem small, but they painted a clear picture of bias in action. As she wrote down her observations, she noticed a young flight attendant approaching. He was polite, hesitant, and seemed unsure how to address her. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" he asked quietly. She looked up, offering a small, composed smile. "Everything is fine," she said calmly. "I just want to make sure the staff understands the situation from my perspective." He nodded, taking note of her words, and moved on. She appreciated his discretion and professionalism. Even small gestures of respect mattered, especially in moments when she had been treated unfairly. The flight continued, and she used the time to reflect on her career and the challenges she had overcome. She remembered early days when she had been underestimated because of her background, dismissed in meetings, or overlooked for opportunities she had earned. Those experiences had taught her resilience, the importance of patience, and the value of self-respect. She realized that the incident in the lounge, while uncomfortable, was just another test of her composure and determination. Her thoughts shifted to the broader implications of what had happened. It wasn't just about a single seat in a lounge or a brief moment of discomfort. It was about how society still measured worth through outdated lenses, how people's assumptions could shape actions, and how small acts of discrimination could reinforce larger patterns of inequality. She felt a sense of responsibility, not just for herself but for everyone who might face similar situations in the future. She wanted to turn this moment into a catalyst for change, a way to challenge assumptions and advocate for fairness. As the flight progressed, she noticed other passengers glancing in her direction more frequently. Some whispered to one another, clearly discussing the earlier incident. A few even took out their phones, subtly recording or taking notes. She didn't react, but she felt a quiet sense of reassurance. Witnesses mattered. Observers mattered. Even if the staff and the passenger involved tried to downplay the situation, the truth had a way of emerging when people paid attention. She thought about the power of accountability. In her own company, she had always emphasized the importance of fairness, transparency, and responsibility. People had to answer for their actions, not just in theory but in practice. And now, in this unexpected setting, she saw the same principles at play. She could choose to ignore the incident, accept it quietly, and move on. Or she could act, ensuring that the actions of the staff and the passenger were addressed in a way that reinforced respect and equality. By the time the flight attendants began preparing for landing, she had made her decision. She would address the situation directly, but with professionalism and clarity. She would not attack or shame anyone unnecessarily. Her goal was accountability, not revenge. She wanted to ensure that everyone involved understood the impact of their actions, and that steps would be taken to prevent similar incidents in the future. As the plane descended, she reviewed her notes one last time. Every detail mattered: the timing, the words used, the reactions of staff, and the behavior of the passenger. These details would form the foundation of her communication with the company, and if necessary, the public. She had learned over the years that precision and clarity were essential when addressing unfair treatment. Emotional responses could cloud judgment, while well-documented observations carried undeniable weight. When the plane finally touched down, she felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The journey was not just about reaching her destination. It was about what would happen next. She moved quickly through the terminal, confident and composed, ready to engage with management and staff as needed. She knew that the story would unfold in ways that could create meaningful change, not just for herself but for others who might face similar challenges. As she exited the aircraft, she noticed the same staff who had requested her to move from her lounge seat waiting nearby. They greeted her politely, though there was a subtle tension in their demeanor. She met their eyes calmly, projecting authority and dignity. She did not speak immediately, allowing the moment to settle. It was important that her presence alone communicated that she would not be disregarded or dismissed lightly. The CEO then moved toward the exit of the terminal, aware that her actions and words in the coming minutes would matter. She would address the incident directly with the airline's management, ensuring that fairness, respect, and accountability were upheld. But she also felt a quiet satisfaction. She had handled the situation with grace, maintained her composure, and set the stage for meaningful action. Even in discomfort, she realized power and dignity could be maintained. She had been tested, and she had risen to the challenge. The experience was a reminder that fairness was not always guaranteed, but resilience, composure, and thoughtful action could turn moments of injustice into opportunities for change. And as she walked toward the management offices, ready to make her voice heard, she felt a quiet confidence. The incident in the lounge was just the beginning, a spark that would ignite accountability and awareness. She was ready to ensure that respect and fairness were upheld, not just for herself but for everyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. The journey ahead promised challenges, but she was prepared. She had faced obstacles before, and she knew how to navigate them with clarity, dignity, and unwavering determination. After landing, the CEO moved quickly through the airport, keeping her focus sharp. She knew that handling the incident calmly but decisively was crucial. Her goal wasn't to create drama or attack anyone personally. It was to ensure accountability and fairness. She had learned throughout her career that calm clarity often had more impact than anger or confrontation. As she walked toward the customer service desk, she noticed the airline staff watching her. Their smiles were polite but tense. She could feel that the earlier incident in the lounge was weighing on them. They had acted in a way that was neither professional nor respectful, and now, faced with the presence of someone whose achievements were widely recognized, they seemed uncertain. She approached the desk, her posture straight, her expression composed. She greeted the staff politely, but with an air of authority that made it clear she expected to be heard. The manager arrived quickly, perhaps sensing that this was not a standard complaint. "Good afternoon," she said calmly. "I would like to discuss an incident that happened in your VIP lounge this morning." The manager nodded and gestured for her to sit, leading her to a small meeting area. The CEO took a seat and placed her bag beside her. Her calm, collected demeanor set the tone for the conversation. She began by explaining exactly what had happened. She described the VIP lounge, the seat she had chosen, and how she had been asked to vacate it for another passenger. She spoke slowly and clearly, emphasizing her surprise and discomfort at being treated differently despite her status as a long-standing VIP member. She described the subtle cues, the staff's hesitation, the passengers' entitled demeanor, and the overall tension in the lounge. She didn't exaggerate or make accusations. She simply laid out the facts, letting them speak for themselves. The manager listened attentively, nodding occasionally. He asked a few questions to clarify details, but his tone suggested that he was aware the situation was serious. "I understand," he said finally. "This is unacceptable. We will need to investigate this immediately." She appreciated his words but knew that promises alone were not enough. Actions had to follow. She suggested that the staff involved be identified and that a clear review of their behavior take place. She also emphasized the importance of retraining or disciplinary action if necessary to prevent such incidents in the future. As they spoke, the CEO noticed the manager's growing concern. He seemed to realize that the incident was not just a minor error. It reflected a deeper issue of bias and poor judgment. She remained composed, using her calm presence to reinforce the seriousness of the matter. She was firm but respectful, making it clear that her goal was accountability and fairness, not personal retribution. She believed that handling the situation professionally would create a stronger impact and ensure lasting change. After the initial discussion, the manager excused himself to speak with his team. The CEO remained seated, observing the staff who had asked her to move. They avoided eye contact, their expressions tight. She could sense their unease. They had acted on assumptions rather than professionalism, and now the consequences were becoming clear. Their discomfort was not just about her presence. It was about the realization that their behavior had been noticed, documented, and would be addressed. While waiting, she reflected on how often small acts of bias went unchecked. It wasn't always blatant discrimination, but subtle assumptions and decisions could still create an environment where people were treated unfairly. She had spent her life navigating spaces where she was often underestimated, and she knew that confronting such moments required both courage and strategy. Today, she was turning a personal experience into an opportunity to create awareness and change. Minutes later, the manager returned with several senior staff members. They greeted her politely but with visible tension. The CEO repeated her account calmly, ensuring that every detail was understood. The senior staff listened closely, taking notes and asking questions to clarify the sequence of events. It was clear that the incident had struck a nerve. They realized that this was not just about one seat or one passenger, but about maintaining the integrity and reputation of their company. After the full review, the manager and senior staff began discussing the next steps. They acknowledged that the actions of the lounge staff had been inappropriate and reflected poorly on the company. The CEO remained silent, listening, her presence a reminder that accountability was necessary. She could see that the staff were grappling with the consequences, understanding that professionalism required more than following orders. It required judgment, fairness, and respect for all clients. The manager finally turned to her. "We will take immediate action," he said firmly. "The staff involved will be disciplined, and we will implement additional training to ensure this does not happen again. We value all our clients equally, and this behavior is unacceptable." She nodded, appreciating the clarity of his words. It was not enough to address the incident superficially. Real change had to be implemented to prevent similar situations in the future. Once the discussion concluded, she left the office, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. The situation had been acknowledged and steps were being taken to correct the behavior. She knew that the process was not over. The real impact would come from the changes in training, the accountability of staff, and the awareness that discriminatory behavior would not be tolerated. But she also knew that her approach, calm, clear, and professional, had set the tone for meaningful action. Outside the office, she noticed that other passengers were observing her. Some whispered among themselves, clearly aware of the earlier incident and the seriousness with which she had addressed it. She did not engage with them, but she felt a sense of quiet reassurance. Witnesses mattered. Observers mattered. When injustice occurred, it was important that people were aware and that accountability was visible. As she walked toward her next destination, her thoughts turned to the broader lessons of the day. Bias and discrimination could appear in any setting, even in spaces designed for comfort and professionalism. But how one responded to these challenges could define the outcome. By maintaining composure, documenting facts, and approaching the situation strategically, she had turned a moment of discomfort into an opportunity for accountability and change. She also reflected on the courage it took to address such incidents. Many people, faced with similar situations, might choose to remain silent, fearing confrontation or retaliation, but she understood that silence allowed unfairness to persist. By speaking up, she was not only asserting her own dignity but also creating a precedent for fairness and respect for others who might face similar challenges. Later, as she prepared to attend her conference, she received messages from colleagues and friends who had heard about the incident. They expressed support and admiration for how she had handled the situation. Some suggested that she share the experience publicly to highlight the importance of accountability and equality in professional spaces. She considered this carefully. While she did not want to make the incident about publicity, she recognized the potential to raise awareness and encourage meaningful change. She decided to share a brief account on her professional network, focusing on the lessons learned rather than the humiliation she had experienced. She emphasized the importance of fairness, respect, and accountability in all professional interactions. The response was immediate. Messages of support poured in from colleagues, clients, and strangers alike. Many expressed admiration for her composure, while others shared similar experiences and expressed gratitude for her willingness to speak out. The CEO realized that the story had begun to resonate with people far beyond her immediate circle. It was no longer just about a seat in a lounge. It was about the broader issue of bias, the need for accountability, and the power of calm, strategic action. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. The incident, which had started as a moment of discomfort and injustice, had become a catalyst for awareness, dialogue, and change. That evening, she reflected on the day's events in her hotel room. The lounge incident, the boarding, the confrontation with management, and the initial steps toward accountability had all unfolded in a way that reinforced her belief in the importance of integrity and composure. She thought about the staff who had acted inappropriately, hoping that they would learn from the experience and understand the importance of professionalism and fairness. She also thought about the passengers who had witnessed the situation, hoping that their awareness would contribute to a culture of respect and accountability. Despite the challenges of the day, she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had faced an unexpected obstacle with dignity, turned it into an opportunity for meaningful action, and begun a process that could create lasting change. She knew that there would be follow-up, that the staff would be held accountable, and that the company would need to implement training and policies to prevent similar incidents. But she also knew that her role was not just to respond to injustice. It was to lead by example, showing how composure, clarity, and strategic action could transform uncomfortable moments into catalysts for change. As she prepared for the next day's conference, she felt a quiet satisfaction. The journey from the lounge to this point had been unexpected, challenging, and illuminating. She had been tested in a way that went beyond professional skill or business acumen. It had been a test of resilience, composure, and moral clarity. And she had passed it. In that moment, she understood that leadership was not just about success in the boardroom. It was about facing adversity with dignity, standing up for what was right, and using moments of challenge to create positive change. She felt confident that the actions taken by the airline would send a clear message about the importance of fairness and accountability, and she knew that the experience, though uncomfortable, would strengthen her resolve to advocate for equality and respect in all professional spaces. The CEO finally rested, knowing that she had turned a moment of injustice into an opportunity for meaningful action. She had maintained her dignity, documented the situation, and set in motion a process of accountability. The incident, which could have been a source of frustration or humiliation, had instead become a story of resilience, clarity, and leadership. The next morning, the CEO woke up early, her mind already busy with plans and responsibilities, but also with a quiet satisfaction about the events of the previous day. She reflected on how even small acts of bias, when left unchecked, could create larger problems. Yet she felt encouraged knowing that the situation was finally being addressed. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that reflected professionalism and confidence. She wanted her presence to be a reminder that dignity and composure carried weight, especially when confronting injustice. As she arrived at the airline's corporate office, she noticed the staff who had been involved in the lounge incident were present, though they kept their distance. Their expressions were tense, polite, but wary. She didn't seek confrontation. Her purpose was not to humiliate them, but to ensure accountability. She walked past them calmly, her head held high, aware that her demeanor alone communicated authority. She had spent her life in situations where presence mattered more than words, and today was no different. The senior management team had already gathered, prepared to discuss the situation thoroughly. The CEO began by recounting the events one more time, calmly and clearly. She described the sequence of events in the lounge, the way the staff had handled the situation, and the subtle cues that had indicated bias. She emphasized the impact that the incident had, not only on her personally but on the perception of the company by other VIP clients and passengers. She spoke without anger but with firm clarity that made it impossible for anyone to minimize the importance of her account. As she spoke, the room was quiet. The staff who had asked her to move avoided eye contact, shifting nervously. Senior management listened intently, taking notes and occasionally asking questions to clarify details. It became clear that the incident was being taken seriously. The CEO could see the recognition in their expressions, the understanding that their staff had acted improperly, and that corrective action was not optional but necessary. After her account, one of the senior managers spoke. "We acknowledge the seriousness of what happened," he said. "This behavior does not align with our company values, and immediate steps will be taken to address it. The staff involved will be disciplined, and additional training will be provided to ensure fairness and professionalism in all interactions." The CEO nodded, appreciating the clarity and commitment. She had learned that promises alone were not enough. There had to be action, and she would continue to follow up until it was clear that meaningful change had been implemented. The CEO suggested that the staff involved be reassigned temporarily while the investigation continued. She also recommended that the airline review its VIP service policies to prevent similar incidents. The management team agreed, noting that this situation highlighted gaps in training and awareness that needed immediate attention. It was a moment of accountability, a chance to ensure that fairness and respect were not optional but fundamental to their operations. During the discussion, she noticed that one of the junior staff members who had been present in the lounge approached her quietly. "I just want to apologize for what happened," he said softly. "I didn't feel right about it, but I wasn't sure how to handle the situation." She looked at him calmly. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "It's important to recognize when something is wrong and to take responsibility. That's how we grow and improve." The brief exchange was a reminder that awareness and honesty were often the first steps toward meaningful change. After the meeting, the CEO was escorted to a private lounge area where she could relax before continuing her day. She reflected on how quickly the airline had acted, but she also knew that true accountability would take more than words. Staff behavior would need to be corrected, policies adjusted, and awareness instilled at every level. She felt confident that the changes would happen, knowing that she had approached the situation with calm authority and documented clarity. Word about the incident had begun to circulate quietly among other passengers and staff. Some had witnessed the initial event, while others had heard through colleagues. The CEO realized that her calm handling of the situation had already influenced perceptions. People were noticing how she had responded, not with anger but with composure, clarity, and authority. That alone was making a difference. It was a reminder that dignity in the face of unfairness could be more powerful than confrontation. As the day progressed, she received a message from the airline confirming that the staff involved had been temporarily removed from their duties pending further review. The message was professional but clear, indicating that the company was serious about accountability. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The process was unfolding as it should, with fairness and professionalism guiding the steps being taken. Later, she was invited to speak briefly with the remaining staff as part of a training initiative. The airline wanted to use her experience as an example to highlight the importance of professionalism, fairness, and awareness in all interactions. She agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to make a broader impact. Standing before the staff, she spoke calmly but firmly, recounting the incident without personal blame, emphasizing the lessons that could be learned. She highlighted the importance of treating all clients with respect and of understanding the impact that even small decisions could have on others. The staff listened attentively, some nodding in understanding, others visibly reflecting on their own actions. The CEO emphasized that professionalism wasn't just about following rules. It was about judgment, awareness, and respect for the dignity of every individual. She encouraged them to approach each interaction thoughtfully, to consider how their decisions could affect the experience and perception of their clients. It was a message that resonated deeply, creating a moment of awareness and reflection within the team. After her session, she returned to her own schedule, feeling that the day's events had achieved more than she had initially expected. The incident, which had begun as a moment of discomfort and bias, had transformed into a platform for awareness, education, and change. She thought about how small actions, when handled with composure and clarity, could have ripple effects far beyond the immediate moment. Later in the evening, she received a formal apology from the airline's senior leadership. The letter acknowledged the incident, recognized the staff's inappropriate behavior, and confirmed that steps had been taken to address the situation. It also highlighted the company's commitment to fairness, professionalism, and respect for all clients. Reading the apology, she felt that her efforts to maintain calm and clarity had been validated. The situation had been handled with seriousness and integrity, and meaningful change was underway. As she reflected on the day, she considered the broader impact of what had occurred. The incident was a reminder that bias could appear anywhere, even in places designed for comfort and professionalism. But it was also a reminder that composure, clarity, and strategic action could turn an uncomfortable moment into a catalyst for change. She felt confident that the lessons learned would extend beyond the immediate staff, influencing broader policies and shaping awareness for the future. Throughout the day, colleagues, friends, and even strangers reached out to express support and admiration for how she had handled the situation. Many shared similar experiences, acknowledging the difficulty of confronting bias while maintaining professionalism. Others expressed appreciation for the calm and composed manner in which she had navigated the situation, recognizing that her approach had created space for meaningful accountability rather than conflict. As she prepared for the next day's conference, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The events of the previous day had demonstrated that leadership wasn't just about professional skill or business acumen. It was about integrity, composure, and the ability to turn challenging situations into opportunities for growth and awareness. She realized that the incident had strengthened her understanding of these principles and had provided an example for others to follow. That evening, as she reviewed her notes and planned her next steps, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The lounge incident, the confrontation with management, and the subsequent steps toward accountability had all unfolded in a way that reinforced her belief in fairness, professionalism, and dignity. She knew that the staff involved would be held accountable, that training and policy adjustments would be implemented, and that the company's culture would be strengthened as a result. Even in moments of discomfort and unfairness, she had maintained control, dignity, and clarity. She had turned an unjust situation into an opportunity for meaningful action, ensuring that the experience would not be forgotten and that lessons would be learned. It was a reminder that leadership required resilience, patience, and the courage to address difficult situations thoughtfully and strategically. As she prepared for sleep that night, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The incident, which could have been a source of frustration or humiliation, had instead become a story of accountability, awareness, and change. She had maintained her dignity, advocated for fairness, and influenced meaningful action. The events of the day reaffirmed her belief that integrity, calm, and strategic response could transform challenging moments into powerful lessons. She drifted off to sleep with the knowledge that her actions had made a difference. The staff had been held accountable, policies were being reviewed, and awareness had been raised among those responsible. What had started as a moment of personal discomfort had grown into a broader story of fairness, responsibility, and the power of calm, composed leadership. She felt prepared for whatever challenges the future might bring, confident that integrity and composure would guide her through any situation. The days following the incident moved quickly, but the CEO remained calm, composed, and focused on her work and her mission. She returned to her routine, attending meetings, preparing for presentations, and keeping in touch with her team. Yet the events of the past week remained present in her mind. They were a reminder of how quickly bias could surface, even in spaces meant for comfort and respect. But they were also a reminder of how resilience, clarity, and dignity could turn those moments into opportunities for change. Word had spread quietly but steadily about the actions taken by the airline. Staff had been dismissed or reassigned, policies were being reviewed, and management had made it clear that such behavior would no longer be tolerated. Other VIP clients began noticing the changes, and some even shared positive feedback with the airline. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. The CEO felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that her calm, strategic approach had contributed to these results. She had not needed to raise her voice or create drama. Her composure and clarity had spoken volumes. As she went about her day, she reflected on the importance of accountability. It wasn't enough to simply address the immediate incident. Real change required understanding the root causes, training staff effectively, and ensuring that fairness and respect were embedded in every aspect of service. She was pleased to hear that the airline had taken these steps seriously. It was not just a lesson for the staff involved, but a broader message about the importance of integrity in all professional interactions. She also noticed a subtle shift in how people treated her in the weeks following the incident. Staff who had once been hesitant or overly cautious now approached with genuine respect, not out of fear but from recognition of her presence and authority. Other passengers, some of whom had witnessed or heard about the event, were more aware of how they interacted with staff and fellow travelers. The CEO realized that the ripple effects of her calm, composed response were extending further than she had initially expected. During this time, she received messages from colleagues and friends praising her for handling the situation with such grace and professionalism. Many shared their own experiences of bias or unfair treatment, expressing appreciation for her example. She recognized that her actions had provided encouragement and validation for others who might have faced similar challenges but had lacked the confidence or platform to speak up. This was an unexpected but welcome outcome, reinforcing the importance of standing firm in dignity and clarity. One afternoon, the airline invited her to participate in a workshop for their staff, aiming to use her experience as a teaching example. She agreed, understanding the potential to make a meaningful impact. Standing before a room of employees, she recounted the incident calmly, emphasizing the lessons that could be learned rather than the personal discomfort she had experienced. She spoke about the importance of fairness, empathy, and awareness in every interaction, explaining how small decisions could have significant consequences for individuals and for the company's reputation. The staff listened attentively, some nodding, others quietly reflecting. She emphasized that professionalism went beyond simply following rules. It required judgment, respect, and consideration for the dignity of every person. She encouraged them to ask themselves how their actions affected others, how unconscious biases might influence decisions, and how accountability and awareness could transform the way they served clients. Her words resonated deeply, creating a moment of reflection and learning. After the workshop, several staff members approached her privately. Some offered apologies for their past behavior, while others expressed gratitude for the clarity and insight she had shared. One young employee admitted, "I didn't realize how much small actions could affect someone. Your example really opened my eyes." She smiled, acknowledging their sincerity. Awareness is the first step. Understanding leads to better choices, and that's how we grow. These exchanges were a reminder that meaningful change often began with honest reflection and the courage to learn from mistakes. Meanwhile, the media had begun picking up the story in a careful, professional way. News outlets focused on the broader lessons rather than sensationalizing the incident. Headlines highlighted how accountability and professional conduct could address unfair treatment, and how leadership and composure could create real change. The CEO chose to remain composed publicly, offering measured comments that emphasized fairness, respect, and integrity. She avoided anger or dramatics, focusing instead on the lessons that could be drawn and the positive impact that accountability could have on an organization. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People admired her ability to handle the situation with calm authority, turning a moment of personal discomfort into a story of leadership and integrity. Many commented on how rare it was to see someone respond to bias with both clarity and dignity, demonstrating that strength could be expressed without aggression. Her actions inspired discussions about professionalism, accountability, and respect in workplaces and public spaces across the country. As the weeks went on, the airline reported that new training programs had been implemented. Staff behavior was being monitored closely, and a renewed emphasis on fairness and customer respect had been embedded into their policies. It was clear that the incident had become a turning point, not only for the individuals involved but for the company's culture as a whole. The CEO felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions had contributed to these improvements. What had started as a personal experience of bias had transformed into a broader movement for awareness and change. She also took time to reflect personally on the lessons learned. The incident had reminded her that leadership was not only about business acumen or professional skill, it was about integrity, resilience, and the courage to confront unfairness thoughtfully and strategically. She realized that even in moments of discomfort, one could maintain dignity, assert authority, and create meaningful change. The experience reinforced her belief that calm, measured responses often carried more weight than immediate emotional reactions. During this period, she continued her work and engagements, but she also made a point to mentor others, sharing insights from her experience. She spoke about how to navigate difficult situations with professionalism, how to document events effectively, and how to advocate for oneself without aggression. Her story became a teaching example for many, illustrating how integrity, clarity, and resilience could turn challenging moments into opportunities for growth and leadership. The airline continued to follow up with her, reporting on the progress of their initiatives and the impact of the changes implemented. She appreciated their transparency and commitment, seeing it as a sign that accountability had been taken seriously. The CEO recognized that lasting change required ongoing attention, but she felt confident that her approach had helped set the foundation for a more respectful and equitable environment. Beyond the professional outcomes, she reflected on the personal growth that had emerged from the experience. Facing bias in such a visible and public setting had been challenging, but it had also reinforced her confidence and resilience. She realized that dignity, composure, and strategic action could influence not only immediate outcomes but also long-term perceptions and behavior. The incident had become more than a personal experience. It had become a lesson in leadership, awareness, and the importance of standing firm in one's values. As the weeks turned into months, she continued to receive messages of support and gratitude from colleagues, clients, and even strangers who had heard about the incident. Many expressed admiration for her ability to handle an uncomfortable and unfair situation with grace and clarity. Some shared their own experiences of bias, expressing appreciation for her example and encouragement. She recognized that her actions had inspired others to approach challenging situations thoughtfully and with dignity, creating a ripple effect far beyond the immediate incident. In her own reflection, she acknowledged that while bias and unfair treatment were realities that could appear anywhere, the response mattered more than the event itself. By maintaining composure, documenting facts, and addressing issues strategically, she had ensured that accountability and fairness were achieved. She understood that moments of discomfort could be transformed into opportunities for leadership, awareness, and meaningful change. Finally, as she looked back on the entire experience, she felt a sense of closure and satisfaction. The staff had been held accountable, policies were improved, awareness had been raised, and the company's culture had been positively influenced. What had begun as a personal experience of bias had evolved into a story of resilience, leadership, and the power of calm, dignified,